Have you ever been so angry that your face felt flushed? Your breath came in quick gasps, like waves crashing hard on the shore, and words burst out like arrows that couldn't be retrieved. Sometimes, just a careless remark from someone is enough to make you live in a heavy atmosphere all day, your heart seething, beating rapidly. And then, after the anger subsides, you find a silent regret creeping in. You wish you had been a little more silent, a little more gentle, so you wouldn't have hurt others or yourself. The Buddha once taught that anger is like a fire that burns down an entire forest of merit. Each time we get angry, the peace in our hearts is consumed, and compassion is obscured. Anger not only makes us lose the present moment's tranquility, but also sows seeds of suffering for the future. Like a clear pond into which a stone is thrown, the surface immediately ripples. The reflection below becomes distorted. When we are angry, our minds are the same. They no longer reflect clear truth, but only distorted images warped by emotion. Recognizing anger is the first step to preserving peace. When we know we are angry, we have a chance to pause, take a deep breath so as not to turn precious moments into ashes. Anger comes and goes like clouds drifting across the sky. But if we cling to it, it will turn into a storm, sweeping away our own serenity. And in that moment, if we quiet down, we will realize that beneath the turbulent waves, there is still a calm surface. That is where the light of peace awaits our return. One autumn afternoon, I met an old friend at a small roadside tea shop. A gentle breeze blew through the window, carrying the faint scent of milk flowers. My friend sat there, eyes weary, as if he had just weathered a storm within. He recounted how, because of a colleague's careless remark, he had lost his temper and blurted out harsh words. At that moment, it felt like fire erupting, spreading rapidly, consuming all gentle thoughts. But when the heat of anger passed, only ashes remained, regret and a cold distance between the two people. I suddenly remembered a verse from the Dhammapada. The fire of hatred burns down the forest of merit. It may sound ancient, but its meaning is profoundly relevant. Merit encompasses all good deeds, the good seeds we sow through kind words, compassionate actions, and benevolent thoughts. But just one moment of anger is like a lush green forest suddenly being engulfed by a raging fire. All the good things we have cultivated for so long can be burnt to ashes in the blink of an eye. In Buddhist teachings, san, hatred, anger, is considered one of the three poisons. Tham, greed. San, hatred. Sirtut, delusion. If tham is insatiable craving, and sarisya is ignorance lacking wisdom, then san is the fire that erupts from dissatisfaction, from not accepting something that goes against one's wishes. When san arises, we no longer see the truth clearly, but only view everything through the distorted lens of emotion. At that time, even a naturally gentle person can become fierce, and a benevolent thought can easily turn into a malicious one. I once witnessed a father who deeply loved his child, but in a moment of anger, he yelled at and hit his child just because the little one broke a cup. The child burst into tears, while the father silently regretted his actions. In that single moment, anger transformed love into hurt, turning a once warm home into a cold place. The Buddha taught that when we let anger lead us, we are like someone holding a burning coal to throw at others. Our own hand will be burned first. Anger not only hurts the person in front of us, but also destroys our own body and mind. Modern medicine also shows that when angry, heart rate quickens, blood pressure rises, muscles tense, and the body releases stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, weakening the immune system. Psychology affirms that anger often leaves invisible wounds in our hearts, gradually diminishing our peace. Thus, the Buddha's teachings are not only spiritually true, but also confirmed by contemporary science. But the Buddha did not teach us to suppress or deny anger. He taught us to look directly at it, to understand its roots. Anger usually arises when we feel insulted, misunderstood, or prevented from getting what we want, or when we expect too much from others. In essence, anger is the cry of the ego when it is hurt. When we realize this, we will blame others less and begin to see that it is our own self that needs healing. Just as a lake's surface, agitated by wind, reflects distorted images, so too does the mind. But when the wind stops blowing, the lake returns to its calm, clear state, reflecting the sky. Our minds are the same. When anger passes, clarity and compassion have a chance to return. The question is whether we have enough mindfulness to stop the wind before it becomes a storm. Looking out the tea shop window that day, I saw golden leaves gently falling to the ground, not clinging, not blaming the wind that carried them away. I suddenly thought, if humans could also let go of anger as gently as a leaf leaving its branch, surely life would have far fewer oppressive days. The Buddha taught that anger is like sediment at the bottom of a lake. If we want the water to be clear, we cannot stir the sediment, but must let it settle. Mindfulness is that settling. When we recognize anger, observe it like someone standing on the bank, watching a river flow, not jumping in, not resisting. It will dissipate on its own. It's not because we are weak, but because we are strong enough not to be swept away. And so, as I left the tea shop, I told my friend that anger is like a sudden shower, noisy, but quickly over. If we don't chase after it, but simply stand still and wait, the sky will brighten again. He remained silent for a long moment, then gently nodded. The weariness in his eyes seemed to have lessened, as if he had found a tranquil sky within himself. Anger can burn many things to the ground, but it is precisely by recognizing and letting it go that we can rebuild the lush forests in our hearts. And then, peace is no longer a distant ideal, but a constant companion, always by our side, just waiting for us to smile and open our hearts to receive it. There are times when we wonder why just one sentence from another person is enough to make us angry. Why someone offers gentle feedback, but we feel disrespected. Why is an unintentional action enough to ignite our hearts? Did the other person truly intend to hurt us? Or are we just looking at the situation through a cracked mirror? I once witnessed a very common scenario. In a meeting, a colleague remarked, "Your presentation, I felt it was missing some data." The colleague spoke in a calm tone, with no intention of criticism. But my friend felt uncomfortable, as if he had just been underestimated in front of many people. The entire rest of the meeting, he was sulky and didn't want to talk. When he got home, he was still irritated, replaying every word his colleague had said. then adding his own thoughts, like, "They look down on me. They think I'm a poor worker." In reality, those thoughts were never spoken, but in his mind, they became truth. The Buddha taught that all suffering has a cause. Anger is no different. It doesn't arise spontaneously, but often stems from two main roots: a wounded ego and unfulfilled expectations. The ego is our sense of self, who we are, how important we are, how we deserve to be treated. When someone touches this sensitive area, even unintentionally, we feel threatened. It's like someone accidentally stepping on an unhealed wound on your foot. You'll react immediately, even if they had no ill intent. Unfulfilled expectations are also a deep source of anger. We hope others will understand us, love us, and respect us. But when that doesn't happen, we feel frustrated, disappointed, and then it turns into anger. Sometimes we get angry because others don't do what we want, or because circumstances don't unfold as we wished. Like when we hope for a sunny day to go out, but it rains all day long, and our heart suddenly feels irritated with the whole sky. The ancients said, "No one can truly hurt us unless we allow them to." This might sound hard to accept at first, but if we calmly reflect, we'll see it makes sense. Another person's words or actions are merely external factors. How we receive and react to them is the decisive factor in our emotions. A remark, if encountered with a peaceful mind, will just be a sound. But if encountered with a mind full of suspicion and self-importance, it will become a knife. It's like a glass of water. If there's already sediment in the glass, a slight stir will immediately make the water cloudy. But if the glass contains clear water, no matter who stirs it, it will remain pure. Our minds are the same. When the ego is full of wounds and expectations, even a small trigger will ignite anger. But when we cultivate understanding and letting go, those triggers will no longer have the power to burn our hearts. I remember once hearing a Zen master tell a story about two people who were insulted. The first person's face turned red, and they immediately argued back. An endless exchange of words. The second person just smiled, saying nothing. When asked why they didn't react, this person replied, "If someone offers you a gift and you don't accept it, then the gift still belongs to them." Insults are the same. If I don't accept it, it cannot hurt me. It sounds simple, but to do that requires a strong inner self and an understanding of the roots of emotion. When we understand that anger is the voice of the ego, we will no longer just look outwards for culprits. Instead, we turn inward to illuminate ourselves. We ask, why do I feel insulted? What within me has been touched? By asking such questions, we will realize that most anger does not come from the present, but from old wounds, painful memories, and long-held prejudices. The person in front of us may only be touching them unintentionally, but we feel as though they are the cause of all our pain. The Buddha taught that to heal anger, one must first look deeply into it with a compassionate heart, compassion for oneself, because we are also human and have weaknesses, compassion for others, because they too may be suffering their own pains. When we have compassion, we will see that the person who makes us angry is actually just a mirror, reflecting what within us needs to be understood and let go of. Imagine our mind as a garden. If there are seeds of hurt, not yet removed from the garden, just one gust of wind can make the seeds of anger sprout. But if we tend to that garden, weeding daily and watering the seeds of love, anger will find it hard to grow. In life, we cannot avoid others saying or doing things that displease us. But we can choose how we react. If we view each challenge to our ego as an opportunity for self-reflection, then each instance becomes a chance to grow, instead of letting it burn away our peace. And then we will realize a gentle truth. No one truly has the power to make us suffer unless we grant them that power. Anger will only be a passing cloud in the sky of our mind, no longer a fire burning the forest of merit. At that point, we will feel our hearts open wide, like a field after rain, fresh, cool, and ready to welcome new sunlight. One afternoon, a sudden downpour began. I stood under a small eaves, watching each raindrop plink onto the road. The rainwater carried away golden leaves, sweeping them quickly and powerfully, so nothing could resist. Anger is like that rain. When it comes crashing down, it sweeps away all the calm, all the love, all the goodness we have cultivated for so long. And when the rain stops, what sometimes remains is only ruin and belated regret. The Zen Buddhist. Karma channel once knew a family. They had lived very happily. The husband and wife loved each other, and their children were well behaved. Yet everything changed because of a single moment of anger. That day, the husband came home after a tiring day at work. Seeing that dinner wasn't ready, he immediately became irritable. The wife, already overwhelmed by work and a small child, responded with harsh words. Words went back and forth, and the anger flared up fiercely. In a moment of impulse, the husband violently threw a bowl to the floor. It shattered, and the hearts of everyone in that house shattered along with it. After that day, they lived in silence, coldness. Love was gradually replaced by suspicion and blame. Finally, they chose to divorce. A family shattered by just 1 minute of anger. But the price paid lasted a lifetime. The Buddha once said that anger not only harms the spirit, but also destroys the body. When we get angry, our heart rate increases, blood pressure rises, muscles tense, and the body releases stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. If this repeats many times, the immune system weakens and illnesses easily arise. People who frequently live in a state of anger have a higher risk of eye conditions, cardiovascular disease, stroke, digestive disorders, insomnia, and even depression. That is a silent but extremely costly price. Not only is our physical health eroded, but our mental well-being also suffers deep harm. Anger steals peace from the mind, turning what should be calm, serene moments into endless battles. When angry, we easily utter words or perform actions that we later regret. Words, once shot like an arrow, cannot be retrieved, and sometimes they leave wounds so deep they may never heal. Anger also has a terrible destructive power over relationships. A close friend can become a stranger. A trusted colleague can become an adversary. A home filled with laughter can turn into an empty house. Just one loss of composure, and the things we value most can slip through our fingers. And as the Buddha taught, anger also burns down the forest of merit. This means that all the good deeds we have done, all the effort we have put into cultivating a good heart, can vanish like smoke if we let anger take control just once. But the most heartbreaking thing is that the price of anger isn't paid by us alone. People often say that when you throw a stone into a lake, the ripples spread far. Our anger is the same. It spreads to those around us, loved ones, friends, colleagues, even unrelated people. Children growing up in an angry environment will learn that way of reacting. The seeds of anger are sown in their innocent souls. And then, one day, they will sprout and continue to spread. The Lin Buddhist Dharma channel remembers a Zen master once saying that when we are angry, we are burning ourselves before the fire even reaches others. That statement is like a sobering warning. We think we are unleashing our anger on someone, but in reality, we are the first to be consumed. Our peace, health, joy, all of them vanish. Looking back at the story of that broken family, I wondered, what if that day they had been silent for a few seconds, taken a deep breath, or simply stepped out of the room to cool down their anger? Would the outcome have been different? Perhaps there would still be a warm home, still meals filled with laughter. But life doesn't offer what-ifs for moments of quick temper. Therefore, the only thing we can do is to learn to pause before anger flares up. The sky after rain can still brighten, but only if we open the window. A soul after bouts of anger can also return to peace, but only if we are willing to let go. The price of anger is too great for us to disregard. When we understand this, we will cherish every moment of peace, every gentle word, every loving action even more. And then, each time anger knocks, we will know to smile and softly say, "I choose peace." One cool afternoon, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves in the temple courtyard. Sparrows chirped on the tiled roof, and the late afternoon sun poured down like warm honey. In that serene space, a group of disciples sat gathered around the Lord Buddha, their eyes turned to him with reverence and anticipation. A disciple approached, his face sorrowful, bowing his head and saying, "Blessed One, I am deeply distressed. Today, someone insulted me, speaking harsh words that made my heart burn like fire. I cannot sit still. Even though I tried to breathe, the images and sounds of those words keep echoing in my head. What should I do so that my heart is not consumed like this?" The Buddha looked at the disciple with gentle eyes. He did not rush to answer, but took a small clay pot from beside him. Inside the pot were a few ripe mangoes. He held up one mango in front of the disciple and asked, "If I offer you this mango, but you do not accept it, to whom does the mango belong?" The disciple immediately replied, "Blessed One, if I do not accept it, it still belongs to you." The Buddha smiled. Likewise, if someone offers you insults and you do not accept them, those words still belong to them. They cannot touch you. They cannot burn your heart, unless you yourself reach out and take them. Those teachings were like cool, refreshing drops of water falling onto a rippling lake. The entire group of disciples fell silent, each as if a lamp had been lit in their heart. The disciple from earlier bowed his head, his heart suddenly lighter, as he realized he was the one who had reached out to accept that heavy gift, and then allowed it to weigh down his own heart. In life, all of us have experienced similar moments. Someone might utter a harsh word, a scornful look, an indifferent attitude. These things are like unpleasant gifts. We have two choices: either reach out and accept them and hold them in our hearts, or let them drop to the ground and walk away. But unfortunately, most of us choose to accept them, even holding on tightly, only to then nurture the fire of anger within ourselves. Try to imagine our soul as a lush green forest full of bird song and the scent of flowers. An insult, a criticism, is nothing more than a small spark. If we calmly look at it with a mindful gaze, that spark will extinguish itself. But if we panic, throwing more kindling and dry leaves onto it, it will flare up and burn down that entire peaceful forest. The Buddha's teaching is a subtle reminder for us to protect the forest of our soul. Don't let a spark from others turn into a huge fire in your heart. Practicing not accepting the gift of insult is not just a way to handle a situation, but also a profound mindfulness exercise. Each time someone says something harsh, remind yourself, this gift is not for me. I do not accept it. Take a deep breath. Exhale slowly. Bring your attention to your feet touching the ground and feel your own stability. The steadier your mind, the less you will be caught up in the negative energy of others. I remember once meeting a middle-aged woman at a Dharma talk. She recounted that in the past, she was very quick-tempered. If anyone said something she disagreed with, she would react immediately. Words would go back and forth until one of them had to walk away. But after hearing the story of the Buddha teaching about the gift not accepted, she began to try applying it. The first time a colleague made a sarcastic remark, she was about to react. But then she remembered the image of the mango the Buddha held. She smiled and said nothing. The other person was flustered, while she clearly felt an unusual lightness. Gradually, she became calmer. Her relationships also became much smoother than before. When we choose not to accept, it's not because we are weak or submissive, but because we have seen the value of peace in our hearts. No one can bestow anger upon us unless we ourselves open the door and invite it in. Like a house with its doors shut tight, a storm outside, no matter how fierce, cannot disturb what is within. The Buddha's teaching doesn't force us to avoid all bad things, but teaches us how to stand firm amidst the waves while still maintaining a serene smile. You can try it today. The next time someone gets angry or says something that hurts you, treat it like a strange gift. You have the right to refuse. Look directly at your emotion, acknowledge it, but don't identify with it. Then, let go. When the gift is not accepted, it will return to the sender. As for you, you remain here, peaceful like an undisturbed lake under the gentle moonlight of an autumn night. Some doors only open when we are calm enough. Likewise, some forms of tranquility only appear when we learn to let go at the right time. Each time you don't accept the gift of an insult, you are quietly planting another flower of compassion in the garden of your soul. One day, you will see that garden bloom, fragrant, with no room for the seeds of anger to take root anymore. Believe that peace has always been within you. It is only obscured by the clouds of anger. When you don't accept the gift of insult, those clouds will dissipate, and the sun of tranquility will shine again. Each deep breath, each gentle smile, is a reminder that you have chosen your path, not allowing others to burn away your peace. And that is the most beautiful gift you can give. put our whole heart into it. Those 3 breaths are not for counting time, but for us to regain self-mastery. It's like standing before a rapidly flowing river. We need to step back a few paces to observe instead of immediately plunging into the water. That step back is a safe distance to avoid being swept away. In anger, 3 deep breaths are a safe distance for the soul. If we practice this regularly, the breath will become a loyal companion. Each time a storm arises, it will remind us that we can pause. We can choose a different reaction. And each time we pause, we are sending ourselves an invaluable gift: peace. There are days when just a frown from someone is enough to make our heart ache. But if we know how to pause, we will see that behind that frown might be a sleepless night, a deep sorrow, or an invisible pressure. When we look with eyes of understanding, anger will give way to empathy. And in that empathy, we will no longer feel the need to compete or win, but only to keep our heart warm and open. Pausing is not weakness. On the contrary, it is a manifestation of inner strength. A truly strong person is not the quickest to react, but the one who knows how to master their emotions. Just as a great river does not change course for a single stone, a peaceful mind does not lose its tranquility over an insult. When we practice the art of pausing, we will realize that each wave of anger, once passed, leaves a lesson. The lesson that happiness does not depend on how others treat us, but on how we nurture our own minds. If the mind is a garden, choose to sow seeds of love, patience, and understanding, instead of letting the weeds of anger sprout and spread. And then one day, when someone unintentionally hurts us, we will smile, inhale deeply, and exhale slowly. We will see that the share of anger no longer finds a place to cling. In the gentle breeze of our breath, peace remains, like a lotus rising above the water, untainted by the mud. If one day you feel yourself about to get angry, remember the fire, and don't add fuel. Remember that each mindful breath is a step bringing you back to serenity. And in that serenity, you will find you don't need to win any argument, because the greatest thing you preserve is a peaceful heart. There's an old story about a man who was betrayed by his friend. The wound in his heart was so deep that each time he remembered it, his heart felt squeezed. He believed that if he held on to this pain tightly, one day the betrayer would suffer the consequences. Yet, month after month, year after year, he realized the other person continued to live peacefully, while he himself grew weaker and weaker. One day, he went to see a Zen master and asked, "Master, how can I make that person suffer as much as I do?" The Zen master just smiled, handed him a glowing red coal, and said, "If you want to throw it at the other person, you must hold it in your hand until you find an opportunity. But look, before you can throw it, your hand is already burned." The man suddenly understood that holding on to resentment is like holding a hot coal. And the first one to be hurt is always oneself. Forgiveness is not for the other person to find peace, but for us to put down that hot coal and return freedom to our own soul. Forgiveness does not mean accepting or agreeing with the wrongs that occurred, nor does it mean erasing memories or denying emotions. Forgiveness simply means we stop letting those wounds continue to control our lives. As the Buddha once taught, anger is a fire, and when we no longer fuel it, it will extinguish itself. Forgiveness is precisely how we stop adding fuel to that fire. In the Dhammapada, he once taught, hatred is never appeased by hatred. It is appeased by love. This is an eternal law. When we understand this, we realize that forgiveness is a gift primarily for ourselves. Some people carry resentment for decades, so much so that their faces and voices take on a bitter hue. They think they're strong because they refuse to forget. But in reality, they are prisoners of memory. Forgiveness here is not about opening the door for the other person to re-enter your life, but about opening the door for yourself to step out of a dark, narrow room. Just as when we put down a heavy stone from our shoulders, we don't do it for anyone else, but because we want to move forward lightly. I once knew an elderly woman in a rural village. Her husband left when their son was just 3, leaving her with the burden of making a living and the pain of betrayal. For many years, she lived with bitterness and vowed never to forgive. But then, as she entered her 70s, looking at her grandchildren gathered around, she suddenly realized she had lived almost her entire life with a heavy heart. One afternoon, she sat on her porch watching the sunset, and suddenly tears streamed down her cheeks. She recounted that at that moment she whispered, "I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I want the rest of my life to be peaceful." And from that day on, she smiled more, slept better. Forgiveness had freed her from her own shackles. If there are times you feel forgiveness is too difficult, try looking at nature. The river doesn't hold on to fallen, dry leaves. It just keeps flowing forward. A field, after harvest, doesn't regret the golden rice that's been gathered, but prepares the soil for a new sowing season. Forgiveness is similar. It's accepting what has happened, but choosing to move forward with an open heart. Because if we cling to hatred, we are like a traveler who forever stops in the darkness, never seeing the light of dawn. There is a simple method the Buddha once taught, the contemplation of compassion. When thinking about someone who hurt you, instead of immediately recalling their mistakes, try to imagine them as they once were. An innocent child who knew how to laugh and longed to be loved. They too have experienced suffering, and that very suffering may have led them to hurt others. Looking at them with eyes of compassion doesn't mean denying the truth, but opening a space in your heart for resentment to depart. Forgiveness is never a one-day task. It's a journey that can sometimes be as long as the years you've held on to pain. But each time you choose to let go a little, you move closer to inner freedom. Ask yourself, do you want to live in the past or step into the present? Do you want to keep holding that glowing red coal or put it down and let your hand heal? The answer will determine whether you find peace. When you close your eyes, imagine yourself standing by the seashore, watching the waves successively crash on the shore and then dissipate. Send your resentment into a wave, letting it carry it far out to sea. Say to yourself, "I forgive so that I may be free." When your mind is at ease, you will realize that forgiveness is not a loss, but the greatest gift you can give yourself. And within that gift, peace will sprout, grow, and blossom in every moment you live. One afternoon, the sun had just broken through after a light rain. Light pierced through the leaves, falling onto the damp earth, creating warm, golden streaks, as if wanting to embrace the entire garden. Sparrows chirped on the branches. Water dripped from the eaves. Everything was so peaceful that it felt as if time itself slowed down. But did you know, even in such a serene setting, if anger is churning within us, all that beauty also fades. Because anger is like a thick curtain draped over our eyes, blurring out the good things that are present. When we react immediately to insult or misunderstanding, we ourselves burn down the tranquil garden in our minds. Perhaps you've often wondered why you can't remain calm when someone acts unfairly towards you. We usually think that if we don't react or retaliate, we are weak and letting others push us around. But in reality, compassion is not weakness. Compassion is the greatest inner strength because it helps us stand firm amidst the waves without being swept away. The Buddha once taught that the person who knows how to respond to anger with love is truly strong, because they do not let their mind be controlled by the emotions of others. There's a beautiful story about the Lord Buddha. One day, he was going on alms round in a village. A man, out of ill will, blocked his path and used crude, harsh words to revile him. But instead of getting angry or reacting sharply, the Buddha simply smiled, his eyes gentle, and quietly continued walking. When a disciple wondered why he didn't respond, the Buddha said, "If someone offers you a gift and you do not accept it, then the gift still belongs to them. Likewise, if you do not accept the words of slander, they cannot touch your mind." That teaching was light as a breeze, yet contained the power to melt all hatred. When we choose compassion instead of reaction, we not only preserve our own peace, but also open a door for the other person to recognize their mistake. Because another person's anger is like a fire. If we respond with fire, both will burn. But if we respond with the cool water of love, that fire will gradually extinguish. Compassion does not mean agreeing with wrongdoings or overlooking all injustices. Compassion means we see the suffering hidden deep within the other person, understanding that their actions and words stem from ignorance, fear, or hurt. And instead of contributing to the flames, we choose to put them out with the light of understanding. The Lin Ung Buddhist Dharma channel knows it's easy to say, but hard to do, especially when someone touches a raw nerve or insults something we cherish. But try to think about a situation like this. You are holding a full glass of water. Someone accidentally bumps into you, causing water to spill. Many people's first reaction is to get angry, believing the other person was careless. But if you look deeper, you'll see the water spilled because the glass was already full. Even a small bump would cause it to overflow. Our mind is the same. If it's already filled with annoyance and resentment, just one displeasing word will make it flare up. But if within us there is expansive serenity, then even if others deliberately try to provoke us, we will not be swept away. Practicing compassion is a training process. Initially, you might not be able to avoid reacting when hurt. But instead of blaming yourself, see it as an opportunity to reflect and cultivate loving kindness. Each time you're about to get angry, try taking a deep breath and asking yourself, how much suffering must that person be experiencing to act this way? When you truly see their suffering, your anger will subside. That's not a sign of weakness, but of using spiritual strength to protect your peace. You can also practice with small things in daily life. When someone cuts in line, when a colleague displays an unpleasant attitude, when a loved one loses their temper, view these as lessons life sends to help us practice compassion. Like someone training in martial arts, no one is strong from the start. But through each practice session, the body becomes more flexible and the mind becomes steadier. Each time we curb our anger, each time we respond with understanding instead of irritation, we win against ourselves. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha once taught, "Hatred never ceases by hatred. By love alone it ceases." This is an ancient and eternal law. That is not just a verse, but a key that unlocks the door to liberation from the spiral of anger. When we are compassionate towards others, we are also compassionate towards ourselves. Because anger never hurts the other person as much as it wounds our own soul. Try to imagine your mind as a still lake. If someone throws a stone into it, the surface will ripple. But if we maintain our tranquility, those ripples will naturally dissipate. If we respond by throwing more stones, the lake will never be calm. Life already has enough storms. We don't need to add more hurricanes within ourselves. Let compassion be the anchor that holds us in the middle of the open sea. No matter how fierce the waves, we will not be swept away. There's something truly miraculous. When we look at someone with eyes of compassion, we realize they are no longer an adversary, but merely a lost soul. And sometimes, just a gentle smile, a soft word, is enough to melt the rigidity within them. Others may not always change immediately, but they will certainly remember the feeling of being treated with kindness when they expected anger. If you are carrying any resentment, try sitting down, closing your eyes, and imagining the person who made you angry standing before you. Look deeply at them, not to find fault, but to see the pain they carry. Then gently send them a wish. May you find peace. May you be free from suffering. At first, you might find this awkward, but if you practice it regularly, you will realize you are gradually feeling lighter, and the other person no longer causes you as much distress as before. Finally, remember that compassion is not just for those who are cute and likable. Compassion is for everyone, even the most difficult people, because they are precisely the ones who need love the most. For within them lies a tangled, inescapable mess. When you understand this, you will see that each time you respond with compassion, you are sowing a wholesome seed in the soil of your soul. And one day, that seed will blossom into a vibrant flower of peace. In the stillness of twilight, as the sun gradually disappears behind the mountain range, allow your heart to also close off the day's irritations. Forgive. Be compassionate, not because others deserve it, but because your heart deserves peace. Have you ever noticed that whenever you're angry at someone, your mind replays their words and actions over and over, as if you're rewinding an old movie countless times? Each replay brings that angry feeling back to life as intensely as the first time, making your heart boil, your shoulders heavy, and transforming a day that was peaceful into one filled with gloom. In reality, anger is not just an immediate reaction. Often, it's how we keep the past alive in the present moment, with every breath. The ancients said, "The past is like smoke. The present is like a dewdrop." But when we are angry, that smoke doesn't dissipate. The dew doesn't become clear, but turns into a dark cloud lingering around. The Buddha once taught that our mind is like a lake. When the wind rises, the surface ripples, reflecting distorted images. But when the wind calms, the lake returns to its still, clear state, reflecting both the sky and the moon. Anger is that strong wind, disturbing the lake of the mind. If we don't recognize and let it go immediately when it arises, that wind will blow perpetually, keeping the lake from ever being calm. I remember once, on a late autumn afternoon, sitting by the lake at an ancient temple. Golden leaves fell one by one onto the water. A young monk was sweeping the courtyard, his steps slow. The sound of the bamboo broom sweeping gently like a breeze. I asked him, "How can you sweep the courtyard for so long and still be so calm?" He smiled and gave a simple answer. "Because I don't sweep to finish. I sweep to see each leaf fall. When I look at each leaf, I don't think about who made me angry this morning anymore." Hearing that, I understood that living in the present is not about trying to forget the past, but choosing to fully immerse oneself in what is happening, allowing the past to fall away like those leaves. Practicing emotional recognition is like sitting by a lake, observing the wind. When anger begins to rise, don't rush to act. Don't rush to react. Just quietly say to yourself, "This is anger." Look at it as you would a cloud passing across the sky. Know that it is not the sky itself. The sky of the mind is inherently vast and boundless, while anger is just a temporary cloud formation. When we know it's temporary, we won't want to cling to it forever. But to achieve this, we need to practice daily. Don't wait until you're angry to practice letting go. Even when you are peaceful, practice observing your breath. Practice listening to yourself. Because when the mind is accustomed to staying in the present, it will be less pulled back by the past. Just as a lake accustomed to stillness is hard for the wind to keep agitated for long. You can try a simple exercise. Each time someone bothers you before saying anything, take a deep breath and exhale very slowly. In that moment, imagine yourself dropping a pebble into a lake. The pebble falls, ripples spread, and then the water returns to stillness. Breathe like this 3 times, and you will feel the heat within you gradually dissolve. This is not magic, but the power of bringing the mind back to the present. Living in the present doesn't mean ignoring the past, but not allowing the past to continue steering the ship of your life. The past may be behind you, but if you keep looking back, you won't see the path ahead. And that path, in this very moment, is where you are truly living. When you realize that each moment is a flower that blooms only once, you won't want to waste it clinging to faded blossoms. Let anger sleep in closed pages so your heart can open to the rays of sunlight shining today. Just as a lake is still only when the wind stops, our mind is at peace only when we stop feeding past storms. And then one day, you will find yourself smiling gently when you recall things that once bothered you. Because by then, you will have learned to live fully in the present, not letting the winds of yesterday blow away today. In this very moment, take a deep breath, look around, and feel that you are here, you are alive, and you are peaceful enough to smile. Have you ever wondered why you get angry at someone you genuinely still care for deeply? Sometimes it's a family member, a longtime friend, or a colleague you once trusted. You're not angry because they did something terribly wrong. but because they didn't act exactly as you expected. You've painted a beautiful picture in your mind of how they would treat you, what they would say, the care they would show. But then reality is different. They don't do exactly what you want. And immediately, a wave of disappointment creeps into your heart, from which the fire of anger erupts. Expectations are born from affection. But when they become too great, they turn into a rope that binds both ourselves and the other person. We think we are loving, but in reality, sometimes we are constricting. The Buddha once taught that suffering arises from attachment, and attachment here is not just clinging to material possessions or fame. It's also clinging to the image, the script we've drawn in our minds about how people should behave. Once they don't follow that script, we feel betrayed, abandoned, and anger simply flares up. I once knew a woman who dedicated her entire life to her husband and children. She always believed that when her children grew up, they would return to show filial piety, would care for and love her as she had cared for them. But then her children became busy, visiting less, calling less. She didn't voice it, but within her, a sense of hurt and resentment began to stir. She was angry because they weren't living up to her expectations. Her expectations weren't inherently wrong. They just hadn't been viewed in the light of impermanence. When she learned to let go of expectations, she suddenly realized her children still loved her. Only their way of expressing it differed from what she had imagined. And as her heart opened, the anger gradually dissipated like morning mist under the sun. The Buddha taught that if we want to live peacefully, we need to view everything with an unattached mind. When we love, let it be like a cloud passing across the sky, not holding on, not trying to capture. When we hope, let it be with the understanding that all things can change. Otherwise, every expectation we cling to will turn into a trap, ready to shackle our own freedom and that of others. And when that trap snaps shut, it drags with it the blazing fire of anger. Preserving a valuable relationship is often more important than being right or wrong, winning or losing. You might win an argument, but lose the warmth of a bond. You might force someone to do what you want, but in return, you get distance in their heart. Only when we know how to step back and gently release expectations do we have enough space to see the true nature of love. Love is no longer about control, but about letting the other person be themselves. It's like admiring a flower. If we are too afraid it will wilt, we will try every way to keep it in its most beautiful state forever. But that very effort will make the flower lose its natural life. Instead, when we accept that flowers will bloom and then fade, we can enjoy each moment of observation without regret. The same applies to human relationships. When we know that everything is impermanent, we will no longer be overly pained when someone doesn't do what we expect. Try once to release expectations in a relationship where you feel exhausted. Look at that person with fresh eyes, without old scripts. Listen to them with an empty heart, not filled with demands. You will see that as expectations dissipate, anger also vanishes. And then that emptiness will be filled with empathy, understanding, and peace. Just as a lake is truly still only when the wind stops blowing, our mind is at peace only when the winds of expectation and disappointment subside. When we pause, no longer pushing ourselves into waves of emotion, we will see that within us, there has always been a clear blue sky. And from that place, the light of love and wisdom will radiate, illuminating all relationships around us. You can try today, not tomorrow, to let go of a small expectation towards someone. Just one, to see what happens. Perhaps in that very moment, you will feel a cool breeze of freedom creeping into your mind, and you will see that peace was never lost. It was only obscured by the clouds of desire and anger. When the clouds dissipate, the sky remains bright. When the anger fades, the mind remains at peace. One autumn afternoon, as the late afternoon sun spread its golden light everywhere, I happened to be sitting on my porch, hearing a young couple arguing next door. The wife's voice, shrill, mingled with the hurried breaths of resentment. The husband's voice was deeper, but tense and heavy. Each sentence was like an arrow aimed directly at the other's heart. From a distance, I couldn't clearly hear every word, but it was enough to sense a storm raging in both their minds. I suddenly thought, if someone at that moment had listened deeply, not to refute, not to find fault, but to understand what was hidden behind that anger, perhaps the atmosphere would have calmed down significantly. In life, we often listen with our ears, but forget to listen with our hearts. Sometimes the people who say the harshest things are the ones suffering the most. Their anger is like a thick wall covering up inner pain. The Buddha's teachings once reminded us that all external expressions are merely the result of the seeds within the mind. When their minds are hurting, they don't know any other way to express themselves than through sharp words, intense gazes, or shrill voices. If we only react to that outer shell, anger will continue to pile upon anger, creating an inescapable spiral. Deep listening is the art of seeing through the fog of emotions. When someone is venting anger, try to imagine them like a child crying because they stumbled. That child might push you away, scream at you, but deep down, what they need most is a hug. Adults are the same. Anger is often just a clumsy plea from the soul. If we are mindful enough to listen with empathy, that anger will gradually melt away. But to be able to listen deeply, we first need to keep our own minds still. When faced with harsh words, most people's first instinct is to defend themselves or counterattack. This is precisely what escalates the situation. The Buddha's teaching on mindfulness can help us prevent that. When listening to others speak, instead of preparing a response, we simply focus on breathing and sensing each word, each pause, each tremor in their voice. We listen not to reply, but to understand. I remember a friend confiding that during a meeting, her colleague used harsh words, criticizing her in front of many people. Her initial reaction was to feel hot blood rush up. But instead of retaliating, she sat still, looked into her colleague's eyes, and thought to herself, "He must be going through something difficult to speak this way." She patiently listened until he finished. And surprisingly, just a few minutes later, his voice softened, and he slowly apologized. My friend said That was the first time she realized the power of listening with her heart. The ancients had a saying, "When you hear a cry, you feel compassion. When you hear a laugh, you feel affection." But to hear the cry behind forced laughter or angry shouts, we need ears of mindfulness. Deep listening doesn't mean agreeing with everything others say. It's simply how we open a safe space for them to unburden their pain. When they feel understood, anger will be like a thin cloud that naturally dissipates when it meets sunlight. You can practice this in your daily life. When someone says something that upsets you, try taking a deep breath and imagining that the person in front of you is not someone blaming you, but a child needing comfort. Your mind will become less tense, and you will more easily find compassionate responses. You might not change that person immediately, but at least you won't be adding fuel to the fire. The Buddha's teaching on compassion always reminds us that the enemy of anger is not forced silence, but genuine understanding. Understand to love. Love to let go of anger. When you listen deeply, you are sowing a seed of peace in your own heart and in the other person's. If that seed is watered regularly, it will blossom into a flower of forgiveness. And then, as the afternoon fades, you will realize a very simple truth. In every conversation, what matters is not who is right or wrong, but whether we truly see each other. Deep listening is the bridge that takes us to that place, where there are no longer accusations, but only hearts beating together in empathy. Let each time you listen be a time you refresh another person's soul. Because who knows, perhaps in that very moment, you helped someone escape a storm within their heart, and also saved yourself from a fire of anger that could burn away your peace. There are days when we sit quietly in a familiar room, watching the sunlight pierce through the leaves outside the porch, each luminous streak like a droplet falling onto a still lake in that peaceful space. Memories of times we were angry slowly flood back. Someone said something that made our hearts burn, our breath quicken, and our eyes heavy with unspoken words. They made us angry, even very angry. But today, having stepped back and viewed it from a different perspective, we realize that they actually helped us see more clearly the hidden currents within ourselves. It turns out the person who made us angry was also the one who gave us a great lesson about ourselves. The ancients often said, "Those who make us happy only give us comfort, while those who make us angry give us growth." This seems paradoxical, but if we are willing to pause and observe, we will clearly see that each time we get angry, some part of our weakness or stubbornness is being revealed. And in that very moment, if we are mindful enough, we will see ourselves standing before a mirror, and the person holding that mirror is precisely the one we are angry at. The Buddha once taught that the greatest enemy in life is not outside us, but within our own minds. If someone touches our anger, they are actually unintentionally pointing to an unhealed wound. They don't create the anger, they merely reveal it. And instead of habitually blaming, we can try to see them as a silent teacher, showing us where we need healing. This isn't easy, because the human mind always wants to protect itself, to push blame outwards. But if we are patient, we will realize that each conflict is an invaluable opportunity for spiritual practice. I remember a time when a close friend spoke very frankly to me, even somewhat harshly. At that moment, I felt insulted and immediately wanted to react. But that evening, as I sat on the porch listening to the rain fall on the tiled roof, I realized those words had hit exactly what I had been trying to avoid. The discomfort suddenly transformed into a gentle sadness, and then, gradually, into gratitude. Without that moment, perhaps I would still think I was fine, still unaware of a dark corner in my heart that hadn't been illuminated. Just as when we enter a garden, if there is no wind, we won't see the dust clinging to the flower petals. Wind, sometimes strong and sudden, reveals what is hidden deep within. The person who makes us angry is like that wind. They stir things up so we can more clearly see what has silently resided in our consciousness. And only when we see it do we have the chance to clean it, to then be lighter on our life's journey. Buddhist teachings do not instruct us to escape emotions, nor do they force us to pretend to be gentle. When the heart is still boiling, the Buddha taught us to observe it, to touch it with mindfulness, to see that anger is merely a cloud passing across the sky of the soul. When someone makes us angry, we can view it as a bell reminding us that we have a lesson to learn. Anger becomes a bridge leading us from ignorance to understanding, from reaction to awakening. And then we begin to feel gratitude, not gratitude for them hurting us, but gratitude because through them we see what we hadn't seen before. Through them, we train our ability to breathe slowly, to see deeply, to embrace ourselves in moments of inner turbulence. Through them, we learn that true love is not only for those who are pleasant, but also for those who make us uncomfortable. For only when the heart is spacious enough to embrace even what we dislike are we truly free. In such instances, I often imagine the person who made me angry standing in the middle of a vast field, the twilight sun casting a warm, golden hue over them. They're also just a human being who has been hurt, cried, and failed. And perhaps the way they behave towards us today is merely a reflection of the pain they've carried for a long time. When I see them this way, the anger in me softens, giving way to a gentle empathy. The person who makes us angry is not always aware that they are helping us in our practice. Sometimes they are simply living in the way they know how. But whatever their intention, we still have the right to choose how we react. We can choose to hold on to the wound forever and turn it into a reason to close our hearts. Or we can choose to turn it into a seed to plant a new tree of understanding. That tree will grow, its roots reaching deep into the earth, its leaves providing shade for both ourselves and others. When we are grateful, even for those who make us angry, we will see fewer enemies and more teachers in this life. Each encounter becomes a classroom, each injury a test, each tear a profound meditation session. And so, we walk the path of practice with a heart that is increasingly open, lighter, and more liberated. Try it once. When anger arises, instead of saying or doing something rash, close your eyes, inhale deeply, and silently say, "Thank you for showing me this within myself." Perhaps at first, those words will be difficult to utter, but gradually, we will see it as a great gift. For each time we are grateful instead of resentful, we break free from the vicious cycle of suffering. Life does not inherently promise only calm things. But when we know how to use even its storms as lessons, each day becomes a sacred journey. And one day, looking back, we will smile, realizing that the very people who once angered us helped build the path of peace we are now walking, sitting peacefully in the evening garden, listening to the wind whisper through the leaves. We understand that every encounter, whether joyful or sorrowful, carries a deep meaning. The person who makes us angry does not come to break our peace, but to remind us how to find it again. And when the heart has learned to be grateful, even for unpleasant things, somewhere in every breath, we will find an immense tranquility, light as a cloud drifting across the infinite sky. There are days when we suddenly realize our hearts are heavy, not because of today's matters, but because of things that happened long ago. Sometimes it's just an unintentional remark, a cold glance, or a prolonged silence, but it's enough to plant a seed of anger in the heart. That seed of anger grows over the years, its roots digging deep into our every thought and breath, making us gradually forget the inherent lightness of our soul. Resentment is like a small stone falling into a lake. The initial ripples seem harmless, but if we keep throwing stones, the lake will never be calm. In the scriptures, the Buddha once taught that anger is a fire that burns down one's own merit and peace first, before spreading to others. Therefore, the journey of letting go is not about forgiving anyone else, but about saving oneself from that fire. There's a method I've tried and recommended to many: writing a letter of forgiveness. It doesn't need to be sent, nor read by anyone. Just write down everything you've kept inside. As you write, let the pen touch the pains you've hidden, the words you've never dared to speak, the tears you've swallowed. At first, your hand might tremble, your heart might race, the words might be choked. But that is precisely when you are untying each knot in your heart. Writing the letter is not for the other person to know you've forgiven them, but for you to know that you are ready to lay down the burden. Because forgiveness isn't about whether you can forget, but about whether you choose not to let the past continue to imprison you. When you finish the letter, you can fold it and put it in a private place, or burn it and release the ashes into flowing water. Imagine each letter as a dry leaf falling from its branch, gently carried away by the wind. A leaf, once detached, no longer worries about the old season. It is lifted by the wind, embraced by the earth, and then becomes part of the soil that nourishes new life. Our mind is the same. When we release anger, peace will naturally find room to sprout. Another important step in the journey of letting go is self-reflection. Ask yourself, who am I angry at? What am I angry about? And what am I gaining by holding on to this anger? It sounds simple, but answering honestly requires courage. Because sometimes we're not as angry at the other person as we think, but at ourselves for allowing someone else to hurt us. Sometimes we're angry because we feel disrespected or betrayed. But deep down, it's a fear of abandonment, a loneliness that no one touches. When we clearly see the root, we'll realize that angry emotions are just an outer shell covering much softer wounds. The Buddha once taught that the greatest enemy in life is oneself. Holding on to anger for too long is like holding a burning coal in your hand, hoping to burn others. But you are the first one hurt. Each time anger flares up, it burns our own mind. Therefore, letting go is not about forgetting everything, but about releasing the desire for revenge, releasing the need to prove we are right. When we stop trying to win or lose, stop waiting for others to apologize, that's when we truly begin to be free. One autumn afternoon, I once sat by the riverbank, watching golden leaves quietly fall onto the water. They didn't cling to the branches, nor did they regret the summer that had passed. They simply accepted and let go. At that moment, I asked myself, why can't I be like that leaf? Why do I keep holding on to things that have hurt me, only to let that pain continue to wound me? The answer came very gently. Because I haven't fully believed that letting go is a safe choice. And from that moment, I began to trust that. I started to see my anger as a leaf that, when its time comes, will detach and fall. You can also try sitting still, closing your eyes, and imagining yourself releasing each stone from the burden you're carrying on your shoulders. Each stone represents a person, an event, a memory that weighs you down. Let them go gradually until your shoulders are no longer tired. That feeling is liberation. No one can remove the stones for you, but you can choose to put the burden down at any time. Letting go of anger is a journey, not a single moment. There will be days when you think you've let go of everything, but then some small thing stirs up emotions again. Don't be quick to blame yourself. Just as the sea can sometimes be calm and sometimes turbulent, its essence remains water. Emotions are the same. Sometimes they are still, sometimes they surge, but when we recognize their true nature, we will no longer be afraid. The important thing is that each time you feel anger, you remember that you can choose a different path. You can choose to let go. Remember that letting go is not weakness or accepting wrongdoings. Letting go is choosing to keep your mind at peace instead of holding on to wounds. It's accepting that the past cannot be changed, but the present and future can. It's believing that you deserve to live lightly, no longer dragged through long days by anger. And when you can let go, you will find you haven't lost anything at all, but gained so much more: peace, freedom, and a more open heart. Sit down on a quiet morning, inhale deeply, exhale slowly, and smile at yourself. You will realize that everything you have been searching for all this time, peace, happiness, serenity, has always been within you, just waiting for you to put down what no longer belongs to you. Just as a river becomes clear again when it stops being disturbed, your mind will also become clear again when it stops feeding anger. You don't need to wait until everything is perfect to start letting go. Begin today with the smallest things. Perhaps it's forgiving a careless remark, a cold glance, or forgiving yourself for once being weak. Each time you let go, you will feel yourself stepping lighter, breathing deeper, and living more fully. And one day, looking back, you will smile, seeing that you have come a long way. You are no longer someone clinging tightly to dry leaves in your hand, but have learned to let them fall, for the wind to carry them away, and for the morning sun to shine into the space just created in your heart. In that space, you will plant new seeds of love, of compassion, and of peace. One autumn morning, as the sunlight, just warm enough, filtered through the golden leaves, I noticed an old man sitting peacefully by the riverbank, his eyes gently closed, his mouth unspoken. Yet his face exuded an unusual serenity. Beside him, young people were arguing, words flying back and forth over a trivial matter. The sounds of their quarrel echoed in the space, while the old man silently and gently released a dry leaf into the flowing water. When I approached, he just faintly smiled and said, "You see, when the water is disturbed, the leaf swirls. When the water is calm, the leaf floats straight. The human mind is the same. Silence in mindfulness is not avoidance, but keeping one's mind from being swept away in the whirlpool of anger." From that moment, I realized that silence does not equate to weakness or resignation. In many cases, silence is a manifestation of wisdom, of self-mastery. The Buddha once taught that when the fire of anger flares up, if we immediately retaliate with sharp words, it's like adding fuel to the fire. But with just 1 minute of silence, one mindful breath, we can save an entire relationship from breaking down. There are times when words, once spoken, cannot be retrieved. A thoughtless remark can crack a long-standing friendship, distance a family relationship, or break a love. Yet, just one moment of pausing, not uttering words that hurt others, can preserve everything intact, just like a fiercely flowing river. If we add the heavy stones of resentment to it, the current will become even more chaotic. But if we stand on the bank, silently observing, eventually the water will naturally become calm. Silence is not emptiness. Within silence, there is the voice of understanding, of compassion. A person who knows when to be silent is one who knows how to listen to themselves and to the person in front of them. It is a kind of silence, not colored by coldness, but a silence that nurtures love. The ancients had a saying, "A word withheld is a good word." But holding back here doesn't mean suppressing anger in your heart and letting it fester. Holding back here means knowing how to pause, breathe, observe the rising emotion, recognize it, and let it dissipate. Try to recall the last time you were angry with someone. What did that feel like? Your heart racing, breath quickening, face flushed. At such times, we often lose control of our words and actions. But if, in that very moment, we inhale deeply, remain silent, and observe everything, like a cloud drifting across the sky, we will see the anger begin to cool down. That is the power of silence in mindfulness. A Zen master once told a story about a hot-tempered disciple. Whenever someone said something he disagreed with, he would react sharply. One day, the Zen master told him to hold a spoon of water from the lake, keeping its surface still. But each time he got angry, his hand would tremble, making the water ripple. The Zen master smiled. "Your mind is like this lake. When the mind is agitated by anger, you cannot reflect the truth clearly. Only when your mind is calm can you see things as they are." Sometimes silence is the greatest gift we can give to others. When someone is angry, they don't need us to immediately contradict or explain. They need space for their emotions to settle. Our silence is not because we have nothing to say, but because we want to preserve shared peace. Silence at that moment is like lighting a candle in a dark room, illuminating without burning. The outside world is always full of noise. Car horns, arguments, work pressures, life's worries. But there's an even louder kind of noise, the noise in our own minds, incessant thoughts, ready answers to counter, old memories stirring up new anger. Silence in mindfulness is how we quiet that noise to hear the sound of inner peace. Imagine you are in the middle of a forest. It's early morning, the air is fresh, dew still clings to the leaves, and birds sing softly. In that moment, if you are truly silent, you will hear the wind rustling through each branch, the gentle gurgle of a stream, and even the soft beat of your own heart. This silence is not empty, but full of life. When we apply this to our daily lives, silence brings us that same sense of fullness. The Buddha once taught that just as a blacksmith, before forging an object, must heat the metal until it glows red before shaping it, so too must humans. Before speaking, heat their minds with stillness so that their words are kind and beneficial. That teaching reminds us that every word should be born from the ripeness of thought and compassion, not from the impulsiveness of emotion. When you practice silence in mindfulness, you not only protect your own peace, but also contribute to maintaining harmony for those around you. You become a steadfast mountain, standing still amidst a storm, so that those who are wavering can find refuge. And then, from that silence, love will spread. If one day you find yourself caught in a heated argument, try to pause, take a deep breath, and smile. Let silence be your answer. Because sometimes, what others need to hear most is not your words, but the peace radiating from you. Silence is not the end of a conversation, but the opening of a space for both sides to listen more deeply. In that space, we can clearly see the true cause of anger, understand the pain hidden deep within others' words and actions. Then, forgiveness becomes easier, and our hearts feel lighter. Just as the sky remains encompassing, even when clouds obscure it, silence in mindfulness fully preserves the spaciousness of the mind. We don't need to argue to prove we are right, because sometimes right or wrong are just concepts that change with perspective. More important is to maintain tranquility, not letting the fire of anger burn the heart. And so, each time anger comes, we know we have a magical remedy: silence, breathing, and smiling. Just as a leaf, when it leaves its branch, gently falls without clinging or rushing, so too will our hearts, when letting go of anger, feel light, drifting along the current of peace to the haven of freedom. There are afternoons when the sun has already begun to set, and I see the silhouette of an old man sitting on his porch, slowly pouring a hot cup of tea, his eyes following birds flying back to their nests. In that moment, I realize that peace is sometimes simply sitting still, listening to the wind, and letting one's mind soften like flowing water. But for many, the path to peace is not always easy, especially when their hearts still hold so much anger, resentment, and unhealed old wounds. Perhaps you, too, have wondered what we would choose between anger and peace. If anger is likened to a fire, each time we fuel it, that fire flares up, burning away every piece of peace in our soul. The Buddha taught that anger not only harms others, but first destroys oneself. It takes away clarity, takes away smiles, and takes away the tranquility we have painstakingly cultivated. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Lord Buddha once said, "A person who clings to anger is no different from someone holding a burning coal in their hand, hoping to throw it at others, but they themselves are the first to be burned. That statement is not just an idle warning, but a profound truth of life. Each time we get angry, our heart beats faster, our breath quickens, our thoughts become chaotic, and then the hasty words and actions we take in moments of self-loss lead to consequences that we later regret when we come to our senses. Peace, on the contrary, is a cool, refreshing land. It is not noisy, not rushed, yet it has enough power to soothe the scratches in the mind. Choosing peace is not avoidance or weakness, but the courage to pause, take a deep breath, and look at everything with more open eyes. Peace allows us to clearly see that anger is merely a fleeting, dark cloud in the sky of consciousness, and if we don't cling to it, it will dissipate on its own. I know some people will say that letting go of anger is easy to say, but incredibly difficult to do. That's true, because anger often takes root in deep pains and wounds. But my friend, it is precisely because it is difficult that letting go is so precious. Each time you hold back a harsh word, each time you lower your voice when you want to scream, you are planting a seed of peace in the soil of your soul. That seed, initially small and fragile, will over time, with the watering of mindfulness and compassion, grow into a lush green tree, providing shade and sweet fruits. Try to remember the last time you were truly angry. Were things around you still clear then? Or was it just a foggy veil of emotion? After the anger, did you feel tired, exhausted, and even frustrated? That is a sign that anger is not strength, but a burden. A truly strong person is one who can look at things with a calm mind, not letting themselves be swept away. The Buddha taught us to contemplate impermanence, to see that the things that make us angry today may mean nothing tomorrow. Just like a downpour that seems endless when it falls, but then dissolves into cool drops of water, soaking into the earth. If we understand the principle of impermanence, we will no longer want to cling to anger, knowing that everything will pass. The mind of hatred will also pass, as long as we don't feed it. Choosing peace sometimes simply means sitting down with a cup of tea, taking a deep breath, smiling, and telling yourself, it's okay. Everything will be fine. Choosing peace is when we know we don't need to win every argument, because the greatest victory is over oneself. Choosing peace is when we realize that forgiveness is not for others to be at ease, but for our own hearts to be free. In ancient scriptures, the image of a lotus rising from the mud reminds us of a profound lesson. The mud symbolizes difficulties, suffering, and all the anger that has clouded our minds. But the lotus doesn't choose to avoid the mud. It rises from that very place, welcoming the sunlight and radiating pure fragrance. Similarly, our minds, after transforming anger, will become clearer and stronger. Choosing peace is choosing to be a lotus, not letting the mud stain our soul, but transforming it into nourishment to grow ourselves. And now, as I conclude this journey of reflection, I want to ask you one more time, between anger and peace, what will you choose? I hope that from today, you will be brave enough to put down what weighs heavily on your heart, and compassionate enough to forgive both others and yourself. Let each time you let go of anger be a time you sow another seed of peace. Then one day, looking back, you will see your mind's garden full of vibrant lotus blossoms, proudly rising amidst the mud, radiating sweet fragrance, and smiling serenely in the morning sun. You know, anger is like an uninvited guest. They bang on the door, demanding to rush in. And if we hastily open the door, they will bring with them dust, noise, and chaos, flooding our home. But if you gently close the door, sit quietly inside, only hearing the knock without reacting, gradually, that guest will get tired and leave. Maintaining peace is like keeping your house clean. You can't stop people from knocking on your door, but you have the right not to invite them in. Some say that anger sometimes makes us feel strong because it gives us the sensation of resisting, of protecting something. But in reality, anger is just a flimsy suit of armor, and inside is a wounded heart. A peaceful person is truly strong because they don't let fleeting emotions control them. They don't allow a rising wind to capsize their entire boat. Peace does not mean weakness or overlooking everything, but knowing how to act from wisdom rather than impulsiveness. I once met an old monk. His face was always serene. His eyes seemed to see through all storms, yet were never carried away. I asked him, "Master, how can one keep the mind from getting angry at things that go against one's wishes?" He just smiled and replied, "When you know that everything is just like a cloud, you will no longer want to cling to it. Dark clouds will eventually dissipate. Great winds will also pass. Holding on to anger is like holding a cloud in your heart and wishing it would stay, but it never truly belongs to you." Those words were like a cool stream of water, making me realize that anger does not inherently exist forever, but it is our own clinging that makes it heavy. Try to observe the people you were once angry with. Perhaps today they did something that hurt you, but a few months or years later, you will realize that anger has faded, and you may not even clearly remember the reason. If so, why do we let something temporary burn away days that could have been peaceful? Letting go of anger is not for the benefit of others, but first and foremost, for our own rest. It's a strange thing. When you let go of anger, you will feel so light that you can smile at the very things that once annoyed you. It's like standing on a mountaintop, looking down. The winding path below no longer tires you, because you are now in a different position, higher, broader. Peace is standing in that high place, where you are no longer pulled down by every wave of emotion. I remember once passing a lotus pond in the early morning, gentle sunlight shining down, dew still clinging to the lotus petals. Deep beneath the mud lay countless obscurities, yet the lotus still rose, radiating pure fragrance. Life is the same. We cannot avoid all mud, but we can choose to rise like the lotus, so that nothing can stain our soul. Each time you let go of anger, you are rising a little more until your entire being is bathed in light, like a lotus blossoming at dawn. And then, sitting alone in the tranquil afternoon, you will realize that peace is not a gift brought by someone else, but a seed that has long been present in your heart. You only need to nurture it with forgiveness, with compassion, and with times you choose to smile instead of getting angry. One day, you will find yourself changed, not because the world has changed, but because you have become bright enough to illuminate your own path. If possible, starting today, place your hand over your heart and promise that you choose peace, not because you fear anger, but because you cherish every moment of your life. Anger is just a cloud. Peace is the sky. The sky never disappears. We just forget to look up.